One of the great mysteries of life is who am I? One of the great mysteries of philosophy and spirituality and most of the schools that seek to answer that question of who am I is what is essentially the self. And of course that is something the Stoics gave a lot of their attention to. I was recently at the Art Institute of Chicago, that's Chicago's great city art museum, and I encountered my friend Marcus Aurelius over there, and as much as I looked at him and I interacted with him, he had very little to say back through his stony lips. And of course you'll say that wasn't Marcus Aurelius who was there, that was just a statue of him, a representation of him in some way. And that is an argument that I suspect Marcus himself might find pretty interesting. After all, the Stoics are very concerned with the representations of things. What are things as opposed to the representations of things? And the representations of things are how we see them in our mind. I was looking at this statue and thinking what a great person this was, and almost feeling slightly awed, just by a statue, not by a famous sculptor who did the statue. Feeling slightly awed that this was Marcus, and obviously it had been done in his time, and maybe it sat for it in some way. But anyone walking past me in the museum would have just seen me as gawking at some boring old Roman sculpture amongst the hundreds that look more or less the same anyway. What it represents to me is not what it represents to someone else. And how we represent things to ourselves is very key in understanding who that self is. So today I thought we'd spend a little time having a look at what Marcus Aurelius says is the self, or at least a little bit of that, because it's an endless discussion that goes on in his work, but some core features of that, and perhaps in a practical way how we can use Marcus's knowledge to gain better mastery of ourselves, to really understand who are we, and does knowing myself make any difference to the experience of being myself. So Marcus Aurelius talks about the self in a variety of different places throughout his amazing work, The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. But there is a particular chapter late in the work that really seems to indicate the essence of what he sees as the self and the basics of an exercise in order to actually find it for yourself. So looking at our usual friend, the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, he says there are three things of which you are composed: your body, your breath, and your mind. If you can cut the mind free of whatever other people do and say, or of what you have said and done, or of the things that you're afraid will happen, if you can cut yourself free of the impositions of the body and of the breath and what the chaos of fate brings from the outside in and from the inside, so that the mind is free of fate and is clear and able to live on its own terms, doing what is right and accepting what happens, then he says essentially you are learning to live like a sphere, complete and free and without the distractions and the baggage of what the past and the future have to offer. And he goes on to say, if you perfect that, you will be living only in the present, and you will be at least able to live out your remaining time before your death calmly, kindly, and at peace with the God inside you. A reference frequently made by Marcus and the others, the daimon, or spirit, or guiding force, or soul, or guiding soul, or God inside you. A variety of different names. So let's have a look a little bit closer at what he's trying to tell us. He starts off by analyzing the components of the human being as being body, breath, and intellect. The Stoics saw the soul as having a superior part, which acted as this guiding principle. The underlying principle of stoicism, which guides the definition of the self, is the core idea in the difference between those things that I am in control of and those things that I am not. That is probably the single most important principle of Stoicism, that there is a distinction between those things I am in control of and those things I'm not. And Stoicism goes on to say, the only thing that makes sense is to worry about those things that you are in control of. How does that relate to this definition of the self as being in three parts: body, breath, and mind, or intellect, or guiding force? The first step is to recognize that the first two of those are not yours, at least not in the usual sense of that word. Body and breath. You didn't go out and buy them. You didn't make them yourself. You don't even know exactly what they are. They can do things on their own. They can take you by surprise. And they can suddenly end. You could drop dead. So, as Epictetus says about the body and the breath, they are imposed upon you by destiny. You are born finding them, kind of on you, whatever that you is. You're born with body and spirit that you didn't put there, body and breath that you didn't put there. So the first step is to recognize that body and breath are not yours. The only thing that is yours, therefore, is the mind, or the guiding principle. Then, he says, recognize that you need to look after them because of your instinct for self-preservation. It's that practical stoicism that says if you are going to focus on the mind and the guiding principle, it is housed in a body. And it's all very well to say that the body is not yours, because it really isn't in the sense of the word that they mean yours. You still have to, as far as possible, maintain it, so that what is yours, which is the mind, that guiding principle, is able to do its thing. So preservation of body and spirit is yours, but the actual body and breath is not at all. The choice to look after them, that is yours. And in making that choice, you start finding yourself. Don't get confused and thinking that that Marcus or the Stoics are valuing the body and the breath in some very high way that says you should be choosing to look after these, and a pure body is what the self is all about. That is not what he's saying. He's saying it's about choice. You have the choice to look after that body that you were given by destiny. The choice to look after that does belong to you, and making that choice helps you start finding yourself, because the only part of you that is yours is your mind, and it appears to be housed within that body. So that's how body and mind become connected, that the mind makes the choice to look after the body, what is really ours. Epictetus says, purify your judgments, so that nothing that is not yours may become attached to you or become part of your life, so that you don't feel any suffering if it's snatched away from you. It's such a simple but powerful thought. Simple and easier said than done. Purify your judgment so that nothing that is not yours may become attached to you or become part of your life. So you won't feel any suffering when it is snatched away from you. And Epictetus and the Stoics point out that that principle applies especially to people. Isn't that an interesting thought? Of course, the people that you love are not yours. Nobody is yours. So you mustn't treat them as if they were yours. And if you realize they're not yours, you won't get all freaked out and upset when they don't behave as if they were yours, or when they aren't even there. Which, Epictetus says it's like when you want a fruit that is out of season. Are you going to kick and scream and perform? You're going to say, no, well, it's not mine anyway, and it's not here because it's not in season. When the fruit is ready, I assume it'll be here. That's how to treat people, that's how to treat things. But the most important thing is not to become attached to them, not to become attached then to the body or the breath, and realize that the self lies elsewhere. The delimitation of the self is the most fundamental exercise in Stoicism. It really transforms our self-consciousness and our attitude towards our bodies, towards our possessions, towards the past, the present, and towards fate itself. Once we understand the delimitations, what limits and circumscribes ourselves, then we can be free in order to know what the self really is. So that idea of being able to define exactly what the self is considered completely transformative, because it doesn't only help you know who you are, but it changes your attitude towards bodies and things, which is a very powerful thing. We know that many of our issues, the stuff in our lives, is related to our bodies, is related to our relationships, is related to money and other possessions, all things which are primarily not under our control. So if we fully understand the self, we would never expect those things to be in our control, and that will fundamentally change our whole sense of life, our whole experience of life. So fundamentally transformative. Marcus Aurelius goes on to describe 4 circles which circumscribe the self. They create certain limits around the self as well. And by breaking through those 4 circles, by understanding the limits that they create and breaking through that, we will eventually find the self. And it's a step-by-step process through the 4 circles. So here's the exercise. It's a thought exercise. It's an action exercise. It's a daily life exercise. It's an exercise that you can do now and really make a breakthrough, but it's also an exercise that you have to do often and ongoingly and come back to again and again, because of our tendency to attach ourselves to all these things in the 4 circles which circumscribe us. The first circle, he calls it the outermost circle. The first circle that circumscribes us is the circle of other people. Worrying about what they are doing and worrying about why they're doing it and what they're thinking and what they're thinking about you and what they're plotting and all those other questions which basically make you dizzy inside because you don't even have any ability to find out what they're thinking. They turn you away from the attention that you should be paying towards your own thoughts. Your thoughts are your guiding principles. Your thoughts are the origins of your choices. And any of your attachments, the philosophy of assent, which we've described earlier, which understanding what really is yours, what you give permission to, is those things which are in your control. So if you are constantly focused on other people and worrying about what they're doing and saying, you're never going to be able to worry about yourself like you should be. So pay attention to your own guiding principle. Don't worry what he's thinking, what she's doing, or what they think about you, or why. The second circle that circumscribes is time, in the shape of past and future. If we want to become aware of our true selves, we need to be concentrating on the present. Past words and action no longer belong to us. They're gone. Everything we've done before no longer belongs to us. We can't go back and change it. We can't go back and do it again. We'd have to do something new. Everything is new. Everything in the past no longer belongs to us, especially our troubles, our sufferings. We've got a strong tendency to focus on past sufferings, just like we've got a strong tendency to focus on future fears. What if? And we mostly look at the future in a fearful fashion. Sometimes it's not like that. We look at the future with hope and expectation, We look at the past with nostalgia and joy, but those don't belong to us either. In fact, if we look at the future with hope and expectation, then those hopes and expectations can get dashed. Then we'll feel pain and grief and suffering, all because we were attaching our hopes and expectations to something that isn't in our control, the future. Similarly, if we base our beliefs on something that happened in the past, you should accept me for this job because of something that I did in the past. Well, similarly, we're pinning our expectations onto things that are not inside of our control. As Seneca says, of the past and the future, and our sufferings and our fears, the latter no longer concern me, our sufferings in the past. The future does not concern me yet. Neither the past nor the future depend on me. Only the present is within my power. Only in the present moment are you capable of acting and living. It's so obvious, but actually so powerful. Only in the present moment are you capable of acting and living. Because try change the past. You can't do it. Try and engage with a future that hasn't happened yet. It's completely absurd. Those absurdities should make us realize the only assent I can give is to the present. The only thing which I have access to is this present moment. And this present moment is now. It's not even a minute ago or a minute in the future. It is right now. It is only in this exact moment that you are capable of acting and living. There lies your power. Your power is over the present. That can help you let go of the past and of the future. The Stoics are never saying we shouldn't have ambitions or we shouldn't care about anything that happened in the past. We can happily care about them. We can happily have ambitions. If I accept that I'm not in charge of the future, I can have ambitions about it, but what actually happens is kind of irrelevant to me. Could be that, could be that. Wouldn't be nice if it were that. I could look at the past, both the good things and the bad things in the past, and detach myself from them once I understand that I don't have any power to change that. But I can still acknowledge that they're there. I can still say there was that experience in my past which informed me this way, it made me a better person that way, I had a great childhood. Any of those things, the facts are not what we're referring to. It is where we locate our awareness. So that's why we use the words suffering and expectation and fear. It is when emotion gets caught up into it that our awareness gets caught up into it, because the third circle is emotion. And emotions, which are very much outside of our control, they're instinctive and involuntary, often catch the mind up in their flow. They're based on the unknown, they're based often on fear, they're based generally on things that are very temporary in our lives. And they engage the mind as we think about it and worry about it or remember it or fear it, and we get dragged right in. The mind should not be engaged in things which we do not give our assent to. And we did not give our assent to those emotions because they occurred on their own. We reacted. It's an instinct. It's an involuntary instinct. We do not cause them ourselves. In fact, they cause disturbances in our body. And if we give our assent to them, in our mind. But we must not give our assent to things that are not controlled by us, and our emotions are not controlled by us. Our reactions are. So I'm not saying we should not have emotions. We mustn't be all cold and hard, and people define the word stoic as meaning that because it entered the language from ideas like this. But it doesn't mean be unemotional. It means don't react to your emotions. Don't buy into them. Don't give them all this value. You can have them. You can do them. But don't give them this value that says they are my reality or they are me. Don't give them your assent because you don't have control over them. Don't give other people your assent because you don't have control over them. Don't give the past or the present your assent. Don't acknowledge any effect they have on you because you don't have control over them. Rather say, well, in terms of now, how does that relate to now? What can I do now? So, for emotions, we have those emotions. We feel them. We're sensitive people. Most people who are philosophically inclined are sensitive people. So we do feel them, but we don't react to them. We don't let that reaction make a choice or a decision or an action happen in our lives and lead us down some garden path or other. So it's not about don't be sensitive and don't have feelings. It is about excessive reaction. We can use our judgment to control our response to the emotion. It's not the emotion that we are suppressing, it is the reaction to it. The fourth and final circle which circumscribes us, according to Marcus Aurelius, is destiny itself. He says, events come and go like a river in perpetual flux. The body and the breath are caught in that flux. Our emotions are stirred by that flux. But if we are self-aware, we realize that the mind stands apart from that, because the mind can stand there and watch it go by. You can look at the river of fate. You have no power over it, but you can look at it. You can say, oh my word, look what fate did. Look where that's going. Look at this flow of time and fate. Even if we are part of it, we have no control over it, and we have an ability to stand outside of it. The mind stands outside of the flow of fate because it is able to watch it go by. It stands apart from the flux. Therefore, says Marcus, the self is the same as the guiding principle, the soul, the mind, the daimon. It's the same thing. And therefore, the self is raised above the web of destiny. It's a very powerful thought. Destiny might make me sick or poor. Destiny might make me hungry. Destiny might make me die on a certain day. But I can think whatever I please about those things. I can watch those things come and go. I stand separate from destiny, therefore. I'm not in the flux. I'm standing and watching it, and I have the freedom to choose my reaction, to think what I like about that flow of destiny. So the self is thus above destiny. I can refuse to see that past event as a misfortune. I could be blasé about it. I should be. By refusing to see it as misfortunes, I am rising myself above destiny, because destiny says this terrible thing happened. A very powerful thought indeed. So the self is above destiny, and by locating it in the mind, the guiding force, the moral force, the chooser, that's where we find ourselves to be free of destiny, because we are free of how to react to it. When the self thus becomes aware of its freedom, it acts only by making its reason coincide with the reason of universal nature, says philosopher Pierre Hadot. It wants what universal nature wants. The self now tells the truth, both inwardly and outwardly. It acts without value judgment. It recognizes that everything that does not depend on my own moral choice, on its own moral choice, is indifferent and therefore not in its control. And it acts for the common good rather than the individual good. So the self not only rises above destiny and frees itself of destiny, but it begins to act in accord with the greater will, be that God's will or nature's will or whatever, because the individual caught up in all of that is not who the self is. And by aligning itself with the greater will, acts for the common good. And that is the power of understanding the self, that the end result of that is not more me, but that I realize that I'm part of something greater and part of acting for the common good. Very powerful thoughts. One last note that I'm reminded of that the Stoics also say on the subject of self. They say, we definitely love ourselves more than everyone else. Why is it then that we value all their judgments better than our own about us? We worry about what people say about us. We react to what people say about us. We often are terribly badly affected by what people say of us. Why is it that we value what they say of us more than we value what we ourselves say of us, when we love ourselves more than they love us? There's a food for thought. See you back here next Friday at the usual time. Don't miss it.